Okay, we will reconvene our meeting and we will start with Human Services. Mr. Sullivan.
All right, and so I've got funds 186 to 190 to go over with you today. Do we just want to start at 186 and go from there? Is that how we're doing it?
It's not that way in the book, but I don't think we can have, that's not a problem. Whatever you want to start with.
Okay,
29.
We want to start with 186?
yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Okay, and so Fund 186 is just as a little bit of backup information. Just prior to kind of COVID shutting everything down, the state offered the ability for local jurisdictions to retain a portion of the state sales tax and use it for affordable housing. And so that's what generates this. It wasn't a new tax. It was just retaining a portion of the state tax locally. And so this is the fund is for, that has a number of allowable expenses. I'd had conversations initially with the cities, I think because the available housing units, affordable housing units are so small that this fund is going to be geared at capital expenses, very similar to 2060 program I'll talk about here in a minute. And so we'll have a steering committee. We've collected funding. We've not spent any of the funding yet, letting some of it build up. And it's the partnership with local developers. We can contract with housing authorities, as long as the fund, the units are rented at fair market rent, and for households that are at or below 60% AMI. And so I'm in the process of updating the interlocals with the cities for this and all of our local funding programs. And so the interlocals will likely come before the board sometime towards the end of the year. I'm waiting for the cities to send them back signed. I've gone up and presented to MISA and to Connell on the interlocals. Fund balance right now is a little over $66,000. Well, as of June, it was a little over $66,000. Are there any questions regarding this one?
Questions? And I got to apologize. It is in our book that way. I was on the wrong tab.
Okay.
So we're good.
Kyle, you might have just covered this. What's the source of the revenue for that?
It's a portion of the state sales tax. It's actually a 0.00073. The city of Pasco chose to retain theirs, so we're not collecting for the city of Pasco. Is the only one of the Tri-Cities, or the only one of the cities in Benton and Franklin counties, quite frankly, that my office isn't collecting the funding for. And I'm uncertain what the city of Pasco is using their funding for.
You don't have control over the funds with them?
No.
And Benton County, the Kennewick and Richland, they're not doing that?
No. Back when this program was developed, I had gone around and had discussions with, quite frankly, every one of the cities regarding the program. The cities had the option of opting into it and retaining it themselves.
Okay.
They would just have to manage the program, and the only one in the Tri-Cities that chose to opt in and manage their own funding was the city of Pasco.
So who's doing the checks and balances? The state, to make sure that they're using it for what it's intended for?
Yes.
Okay.
And the intended use, is that for like building new?
For building new, renovating, it has to be, it's for capital expenses. geared towards affordable housing units. So rents, like I said earlier, rents have to stay within fair market rent, and fair market rent's determined by HUD. And then it has to serve households that are at or below 60% of the area median income.
But you've
So-
not used any of the money so far.
No.
So who would use that money?
So, typically what we'll do, and it, like I said, this funding source is very similar to our capital program that's supported with document recording fees. And so we'll have a steering committee that will have representation from the cities that participate in the county. Historically, Keith has sat on the steering committee. My assumption the board can choose who they want to represent. Again, my hope would be that Mr. Davidson would be available to participate on that. My hope is that we'll have steering committee meetings come January. And so the steering committee initially advises my office on how much money they want to RFP. And sometimes we don't RFP funding, we just let the fund build so that we can support bigger projects. And so let's say for this, if we have, let's say we RFP $60,000, then we would take applications. We'd put out an RFP, usually out for about a month, accept applications for funding. My office would review them to make sure that the application and the project complied with the requirements of the program. And then the steering committee we'd schedule them, the applicants to come in and present their project to the steering committee. And the steering committee would advise, make recommendations on who I would bring, which projects I would bring to the board to recommend supporting funding for. And then if the board chose to accept those, I would enter into a contract with them for that.
So the contractor that's building this affordable housing, is that just like a grant that he will get if it's approved?
It would be, so an example, a past example, although it wasn't this fund, it was the 2060 fund. A past example that Franklin County had supported previously was for the Pasco Haven project, and it was like $143,000 for land acquisition. And so with that, what we do is we contract those dollars out, and then they invoice my office. In turn, I invoice the auditor's office here, and then we would put a restrictive covenant on the property to make sure that the funds are used in accordance with the program. When at the end of the term of the restrictive covenant, it's lifted, and there aren't restrictions after that. So for example, the Pasco Haven project, we have a 15-year restrictive covenant on that property to make sure that they provide that they do what is required of the grant funding.
Okay.
And there isn't the option. So Franklin County had supported a project that CAC had done here a few years ago. There was a 15-year restrictive covenant on the property. They chose to sell the property, and so the board signed a letter allowing them to sell the property. They just had to return the grant funding because it was still within the years of the restrictive covenant, and so then they cut a check that went back into the fund.
Did they put interest on that, or?
No.
Thank you.
Can you help me follow? Because you said 66 is our balance right now, right? 66,
As
217?
of June, right there.
Okay. So it says the 2023 primary budget is 150.
Yeah, and that's probably a little bit high. I think we generate 40 to 50 grand a year.
Okay. I was just wondering how we got to 150 from 66 when it looks like it's about a $50,000 increment every year.
Yeah, and some of it is, and again, it's a guess. It's based off of a tax.
Gotcha.
So it's,
Yep.
I don't have an exact number.
Okay.
We have As of today, we've got almost 100,000
Oh, okay.
in there in cash. And
With another 50 coming probably, huh?
Yeah, and like I said, what my hope is that we'll be able to contract some of that funding out early in '23.
Okay. Any other questions?
I would have thought that this fund would retain its own interest from interest earnings. Now that you're accumulating a little bit of a fund balance, it's not going to be much money, but interest.
It
from-
will accrue interest. I think the question that Commissioner Mullen had, and maybe I was wrong, is when the money was returned, did we get interest off of that?
That's correct.
Okay, yeah, so it retains its own interest. It'll build,
I didn't see that you budgeted for revenue and interest.
that
Not going to
was,
be a material amount, but very few of these funds do retain their own interest. Veterans Assistance is yet another that does actually have statutory authority to retain their own interest. You do have an interest line item there, but you didn't have on this one, so it just was,
okay.
it's not a big dollar amount, so it's not a big
No, and I
deal.
appreciate you pointing that out, and I'll look into that.
Yeah, okay.
If there's no other questions, we'll move on to the 187.
Okay. The 187 is the Veterans Assistance Fund. And again, background, it's to assist eligible veterans with a number of services that are outlined in the Veterans Assistance Fund policy that the board has signed off on. Some of those will include rental assistance, utility assistance. There's a one-time dental benefit of up to, I think, $2,000. There's our gas vouchers, food vouchers. Those are some of the safety equipment, like steel-tip boots, if somebody needs that to apply for a job, or those kinds of things.
So we asked our attorney yesterday to look into for mental health if they needed to be omitted for that. Is there any chance those funds could be available for that?
For payment of the services,
Yeah?
is that, that's not something currently that's outlined in the vet policy. The RCW is fairly vague.
Yes.
Because they want local communities to be able to have flexibility as to meet the needs. I think what I would suspect, though, is that if there was a veteran that was eligible for this fund, that there's a high likelihood they would be eligible for state assistance by way of Medicaid. And so the Medicaid would pay for the behavioral health treatment. There may be instances where that may not be the case, and I think those, that's something I think maybe that's a conversation to have with the Veterans Advisory Board also, to see if I think maybe one, to feel out if that's an ongoing issue, if we are seeing veterans that are eligible for this fund but for some reason aren't eligible for Medicaid, that would pay for the services. And if it is, we can certainly amend the policy and make that. There is a 12-month rolling assistance. They're eligible for a certain dollar amount per every 12 months. And so once they exhaust that, then they have to wait until
Next
they're
year.
eligible again.
Yeah.
I think, and one of the benefits I think that we have with this program being run out of my office is some of the other programs that my office offers. There are eligible benefits within the veterans policy, but so if a veteran comes in and they're behind on their rent, most of the time we won't use the veterans relief policy. I'll use one of my other housing programs to assist them with that, so that they still retain eligible funding within the policy. And so there are other services that my office provides that will access in if they're, when we can, to avoid spending down this so that they have this. Quite frankly, the biggest thing that we're seeing now are food vouchers. Food's gotten expensive. And so that's what we see the most of. We don't see as much utility or rental assistance because I still have federal COVID dollars that quite frankly, if they're eligible for this, they're eligible for that fund too, and I'll use the federal dollars first. Of course, as the board is aware and has been very supportive of we've hired a veteran service officer. His salary will partly be paid out of this fund, will partly be paid out of the Benton County Veterans Assistance Fund. My intent in the next few weeks will be to bring him before the board just for a meet and greet. It was nice. Mr. Johnson and Mr. Davidson happened to stop by my office just to talk about some programs, and he happened to be in the office. He's out stationed at CBVC, but he had come in to the office, and so they got to meet him, and he's a great guy. You guys are gonna love him. So I'll bring him in the next few weeks to.
And a veteran himself.
Yes, yeah, he's a retired major in the Marines.
I just want to really emphasize that for someone that's been around for a while, I remember when Veterans Assistant, both counties were ran in the auditor's office, and a vet coming in to need assistance would be limited to the $1,500 or $1,200 or whatever the county's limit may be at the time. And they might think that's it. By having it go through the way we have it now, you're doing the intake and seeing if there's these other programs available, so they're getting more complete that they may not have been able to be aware of. And so this is just a really good, this has been a huge positive step in the right direction as opposed to the way we used to do it.
Well, and it's worked really well. I actually have two staff in my office that are kind of the primary points of contact for veterans coming in and using this, and they have weekly, sometimes daily interactions with the other veteran service agencies. And I think we had, there was an issue that came up, and I can't recall. It was some issue with a problem that the veteran had with his home. I don't remember if it was the AC unit or something. It wasn't something that we could assist with, but my staff contacted multiple agencies, the veteran service agencies, and was able to track down some funding that could help with the repairs on that. And so it's worked out really well. There's a networking that goes on with that also. And I think with our veteran service officer coming on board, I think that he's completed all of his training with the WDVA, and so he'll be able to start processing claims soon. And so I think that's a huge benefit to the veteran community.
So Kyle, I didn't hear you mention anything about the VA. Obviously, the VA does both physical and mental health services. And it seems to me that would be the logical first line before we expended relatively scarce local dollars. Excuse me. I think the discussion maybe grew out of talks about a mental health court. And if there were costs associated with that, maybe then we would provide funds for indigent vets who needed cover for those kinds of expenses, not necessarily so much treatment.
Okay.
Although the conversation has broadened out to treatment. I just wanted to remind everybody that the VA does both mental and physical health.
Thanks. Yes, I appreciate that. I forgot to mention that. We have a Richland clinic as well as the clinic in Walla Walla.
So Kyle, this fund, since 2020, I know we got a VSO officer now that's going to be pulling some funds out of there. Benton County's going to be paying out of it too, but we've grown this account almost 315,000 over the last 3 years. We're not using the fund, and it's written in that fund that if we accumulate 4 years worth, we're supposed to look at ceasing collecting the tax. Do you think we're going to be able to keep this under wraps to where it isn't going to get to the point where it's going to be in that state of affairs?
I do. You know, and again, my office was flooded with federal dollars. And though that funding I have in contract, I'll be winding those programs down in '23. So the vast majority of the funding, if it's not expended by June, June is in one contract and September is the other. You know, then it's just the end of the contract term. I've not heard anything that the state or feds are going to extend that out any further, and I'm of an opinion that they probably shouldn't.
So you're using those funds
We
instead
use
of
those
these,
funds.
instead of these funds?
Yes.
Okay.
And so I think that's part of why we've seen, I mean, I've had dollars in contract since March of '20. And so anytime we have, well, you know, again, we've got so many federal dollars, we spend that first if they're eligible, and then rely on the local dollars if there are program requirements that come into play that makes them ineligible, or they've exhausted their benefit, or whatever reason. We use the local dollars kind of as a last resort. I think one thing that I think we'll need to consider moving forward also, and Commissioner, I think the board was all probably involved in conversations early on from both advisory boards, from the entire veteran community. What I keep hearing is that when our VSO is up and running, there's going to be so much work that it's going to be overwhelming. There was really a push early on to have two veteran service officers. My take on it was I'd rather start with one,
Yes.
and then come back before the board after a year and present, here's all the great things that we've done, but here's where we think we're missing the mark. And so we think that with the second VSO, and maybe the data won't support that. I don't know. But my take when we're developing a new program is, you know, let's not go gangbusters. Let's start reasonably and then present data. And they collect data on everything. So I think we'll have, the WDVA does a great job in the information that our VSO will have to put into the system. I think it will be a really good picture for the board, you know, if and when that day comes. And I think regardless, we'll after he's been doing this for 6 months to a year, whenever we feel like we've got a good data pull, we'll come and present and say, hey, here's what we're getting for.
And maybe you might need an assistant for him rather than another VSO.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the benefits of having him stationed at CBVC. They've provided a great deal of support for him, and they have, it's the equivalent of assistant. I don't know if that's what the term is that they're using for the position, but he has supports.
Good.
Veteran supports that if he was housed in my office, it would be a little more difficult for me to help with. And so I think, but again, I think that's, everyone keeps telling me he's going to be overwhelmed. I don't want him to be overwhelmed, but
Exactly.
we'll address that issue when we come up, and we would have a lot of conversations, you know, about where we were at with the services that he's providing and the benefits to the veteran community that, you know, before I would have any kind of an ask in the future. But I think that's one thing at least to keep maybe in the back of your mind with regard to this fund.
Yeah.
Is that there may be additional requests for expenses in the future too.
Since I've been here, I've only seen it grow, and I want the veterans to receive the funding and the help that they need, so.
Yeah, and it's, yeah, I know that's a fund that is, you know, we don't like to see grow, but again, my take on it is if I can use federal dollars, I'd rather
Yeah.
do that than our local funding, because I believe there's a need, and I believe that we'll be able to spend the local dollars, but we're not always gonna have this level of federal funding either. So,
All righty.
take it while we got it.
Is there any more questions on 187? We'll move on to 188.
Okay, so 188, actually 188 and 189 are both supported from document recording fees. So every document that's recorded in the county, there's a surcharge added to it. Part of that goes into the Ending Homelessness Fund. You may also hear it, or I'll refer to it as 2163. You know, and I'll talk about the where the other funding goes next. The 2163 fund, or the Ending Homelessness Fund, is geared towards services to help fill gaps in our housing system. And to use an example, I had come before the board here a few years ago because requesting to add a program, a young adult housing program, and it was after many conversations with our youth shelter and CPS, Child Protective Services, regarding kids that were enrolled in educational programs but aging out of the system. And so our youth shelter, on the youth's 18th birthday, because it was licensed as a youth shelter, they could no longer remain there. And so when you've got a newly 18-year-old who, quite frankly, by law is an adult but is still a kid, trying to transition into adulthood, and the only housing resource that they have at that time is the Union Gospel Mission. And I think there's a lot of good things that the Union Gospel Mission does. Me personally, I didn't feel like that was a situation for them to succeed while they're still in enrolled in high school, or a GED program, learning to, participating in job development programs. And so we developed a limited short-term rental subsidy to assist with them, followed with case management. At the time, we had case management through Community and Schools, that we could pay for their rent. They would provide case management to make sure that they were completing their educational goals, that if there were school to work kinds of programs, that they were enrolled in those. It was a short-term subsidy, anywhere from 3 months. It was graduated 3 months to a year until they were able to complete their educational requirements. So that's an example of one of the programs that we developed with this fund to fill a gap in the system. Another example, and I'll certainly reach out to each one of you individually before coming before the board. At the beginning of the year, I may be approaching you about developing a new program geared towards seniors. What we're running into now is we're seeing senior citizens that retired on fixed incomes, and rent is escalating to the point that they come through my office. They've been evicted because they have not been able to pay rent, or we're in the process of helping them with some of the rental assistance, the RAP fund, the federal dollars. Again, that funding is going to run out mid 23, and there's not a lot of options for that population. And so, again, there are some things we got to work through in my office with regard to funding. But again, that would be another example of a program. I think one thing to consider with this, since interest rates have gone up, quite frankly, a big source of revenue over the last few years, because interest rates have been so low, is people refinancing their homes. We're not seeing that. We're not really seeing a lot of home purchases now because the inventory has been so low, and so we're projecting about a 35% decrease in revenue in that program, simply because of the interest rates going up. So some of that is we'll have to see how that plays out. There is, as you can tell, there is a bit of a little bit higher of a fund balance than what I would normally want in there. That is primarily associated to the federal dollars that we have. And so I will certainly keep the board updated on what we see happening there, but I don't suspect interest rates are going to drop in the near future. So I think this will be maybe an ongoing issue, and I'll make adjustments internally. Not only do I support internal programs with this, but we do contract some of this funding out for shelter operations for My Friend's Place and the domestic violence shelter. And so, we would make adjustments to our internal programs. I think supporting the shelters is important.
I know that checked out the news this morning on Fox, and they said up in the Northeast that heating oil is at an all-record high, and they're going to run out. They don't have enough to supply this winter if they have a really cold shot. And they said the elderly up there are going to have to choose between heat or eat. And maybe that'd be something else that we could look at if the elderly can't pay their electrical bill. We have pretty affordable electricity here, but I don't know if everybody's heating with electricity or if they can even afford it, because it has gone up.
Sure. Everything's going up.
Yeah.
Any other questions on Fund 188?
Just real quickly, this is basically a rental assistance, fund, Section 8, is there any kind of coupling between the housing authorities and Section 8 type, or also the Department of Ag migrant housing programs?
Not had any involvement with migrant housing. Typically, what will end up, and the Section 8 program is a completely different program. One thing that we've helped with this fund before is when someone is able to access Section 8 and they find a unit that they can rent. Sometimes they don't have move-in costs, so first month's rent, deposit, utility deposit, those kinds of things. And that's something we can help with this fund to get them into, if they've
that
got a
could be a
Section
real
8
big
voucher,
help.
that's it. Yeah, they're set. That's a one-time assistance, and then they're good. We don't have to provide assistance beyond that, and so we'll do that often.
Oh, that's good to hear, because that's substantial.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other questions on 188? Did you cover 189 also, or is it?
Well, I've talked a little bit about it again. Just the Reader's Digest version is it's the other part of the document. It's supported with document recording fees. It's a capital project. It supports capital projects. It's very similar to the 1406 that we talked about first. There's a steering committee. And this one, Pascal participates in, and so there's representatives from each of the cities on that steering committee, representative from Franklin County on that steering committee, and then it's the same process. We'll issue an RFP. We will vet the programs to make sure that with the applicants to make sure that they are in compliance with program requirements. And again, as long as the 1406 was 60%, had to serve residents that were at 60% their median income. This one is 50%. So it's the financial resources for this are people are a little bit less. They have a little bit less. Interestingly enough, this program, Keith and I had worked on this over COVID, and we'd actually issued 2 RFPs and didn't get any projects that complied with the requirements of the program. So we didn't expend funding, however we tried. And I think it was just, COVID was kind of a tough period for everyone. People weren't looking at developing affordable housing. They were just kind of trying to get through it. And so I anticipate, that we've got a pretty good fund balance. And so I think we could easily RFP $500,000 and try and get some developers to work on some projects. So I'm actually looking forward to this year. So my hope is to do that. If I can get the interlocals returned from the cities, sometime in the next few weeks. They've had them all for a couple of weeks now. My hope is come January, we can issue the RFP. We'll probably leave it open for a month and then try and work on seeing if there are projects that would be good to fund.
Okay. Any questions on 189?
What's the large capital asset that you sold?
Pardon me?
It looks like there was a large capital asset, 126,000 you sold last year, maybe it was the year before.
No, I think that was, we didn't sell anything. I can't think of what that might have been the check coming back from CAC.
Oh,
So I don't know.
this might have been miscoded, it says sale
Yeah, I'm
capital
trying to
asset.
see where that's at.
That's okay, I just was kind of
Yeah,
curious.
we
about
don't
what you-
have, this isn't something we have assets with. We contract out for funding and so.
I didn't think so, that's why I asked, what'd you sell?
Proceed sales. Yeah, and so what I believe that is, I believe that was so maybe I need to change that. It was funding that was returned, I'm almost certain that was the funding returned from CAC for the sale of their property that was partially funded with this grant.
Probably already been audited, so don't change it now, or you get another audit. I didn't say that.
So Kyle, is there any more questions on 189? We got a 190 budget, but not a paper on it.
Oh,
I don't have the paper on it. Maybe we can put it up on the screen. Did you have a paper?
I don't have one, no.
oh, sorry about that. It's a small one, but. And so this is the 2% liquor excise tax.
Gotcha.
We collect it for all of the cities in the county, and it just, the fund has to go towards, and again, RCW that governs this is vague also. It's like almost like 3 sentences. It's really small. And it's again, I think it's vague intentionally so that you can have flexibility locally. It doesn't generate a huge revenue. We just have to apply it to some type of substance use prevention program. And so last year we contracted with Jen Dorsett. She used to be one of our prevention coalition coordinators, and she does this program. It's called Hidden in Plain Sight. And she coordinates with the schools, and the program allows for training. It's for parents that kind of help them identify, what to look for in your kid's room that might lead you to believe that they're either abusing drugs or alcohol. And then it's classes on how to approach them, how to talk with them, those kinds of things. So it's a pretty good program.
Well, maybe we could use that to help provide Norcan for this fentanyl, Emergency.
I believe it could be used for that.
because we had the coroner in here, and this high school kids can have it on the high school grounds in 15 minutes with a text, and if they don't have Norcan, they can't, it doesn't neutralize it, and it'll kill them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the funding, I don't know what that costs. I don't know the funding would go very far. And I know there are grants geared towards Narcan.
Narcan.
Yeah, that may provide more funding. But again, yeah, I believe that would be something that would pay for.
So you mentioned the 260 fund, and you said it was related to the first fund that we went through.
The 2060, yeah, and that
Yeah.
was the last one that we just talked about.
Oh, okay,
That's
2060.
Fund 189.
Oh, that's 189.
Yeah, it's the Affordable Housing Fund.
Okay.
Or it'll also be referred to as 2060 funding. I think it was that was the House bill that.
Yeah, it's not anywhere on the object column. Just has 189. Okay. Any other questions?
Sale of Owen's house for that 126,000 is what it says.
Yeah, the Owens House, that was CAC's home.
All right. That's Tim. He'll find everything if you give him a second.
Tim was great during this. You know, I know you're all aware that my finance manager retired the end of July, and so it was kind of a perfect storm. She retired July 29th. My new finance person, who I still need to bring over to introduce her to you, she was going to come, but we had 5 of my grants being audited by the state, so she's been a little busy. And so, you know, on top of that, Benton County initiated, after 30 years working on their old accounting software, they finally got a new one, and it went live August 1. And so there were some hiccups. So she's still working for me, and so I'm hoping that we can.
That's why you're dragging up over here, because you're in no big hurry to get back over there.
Yeah. So, but Tim was great in helping us get rolling on this. So I want to make sure and let you know how.
We're always
much
glad to
of an
help.
asset he is to the county. So
Good deal.
yeah.
Well, if there's no more questions, we thank you for your time, and get back over there and help her, will you?
All right. Thank you all. Yeah.
All right, we'll move down to County Agent, Mr. Waters.
Now that he's had time with that apple.
I see a big bite out of it.
I didn't bite into it yet. Like I said, if I had I'm not able to bring my pocket knife on campus, so that's my main diagnostic tool is my dirty pocket knife.
And it's down there in
And
the,
it's down in the pickup, yeah.
oh, I thought it was in the tray down there.
No, it's not in the tray. I've learned, I've lost a few of them that way, so I've learned.
There's a
But
lot,
my kids know me pretty well. Every time I get my pocket knife out, my son goes, I'm not eating anything you come with that.
Where that's been.
Places that's been. So I'm not asking for an increase, so I brought in some information because this is what we use the time on. There you go. So we do have a couple changes to the budget. This is just to, like I said, I know this is budget time. I know you guys have been hammered with details for days and days, but just to leave this with you guys, I know we haven't come in and done our normal updates the last couple of years because there's been a lot of restrictions on people in rooms and stuff like that. We'd like to get back into doing that this next calendar year because we do like to keep you guys updated on what we're doing. So this is just kind of a snapshot. There's a pie chart on the front sheet that shows the funding for WSU Extension. I know you guys are all familiar with this, but you guys are key to our funding, but we also do get funding from WSU. We get funding from grants and contracts and things like that. And one thing I would say is our office here in Franklin County and in Benton County, most of our faculty have been on for quite some time, and they're very, very productive, and our grant funding has increased every year, I think, since I've been on. And so we've really come a long way in that. And we're actually we didn't get the grant numbers from one of our faculty here, so that number is even bigger than it shows here. So appreciate your guys' investment in WSU. It's very important for us, but it's just a piece of the puzzle that kind of gets everything done. So wanted to leave that with you. And then on the back side, there's just some impacts from some of our programs. So I know you guys are familiar with a lot of these, but we just like to kind of remind you guys about what we do, because I know you get thrown a lot of details and a lot of things. So if you ever do have questions about anything we're doing or anything anybody in WSU is doing, don't hesitate to contact me or anybody in the office, and we'd be happy to help you with that. So I'll leave that. I'm not going to go over that in great detail, but when we go to the budget, we had 2 changes to the budget this year. We did have an increase in the faculty contributions as recommended by the Washington State Association of Counties. So those were pretty modest increases this year. And that overall line is decreased because, as you guys remember, you're supporting a program support specialist for the 4-H program. And we had that budgeted at a higher amount. Not sure who we were going to recruit for that position. and the person that we hired didn't have a lot of experience, so the way they fell into the salary matrix was lower than we had anticipated. So you'll be billed less for that line item this year, this current fiscal year. And then next year, we ask for less money because even with the mass salary increase that WSU gave employees, we'll still be able to cover that salary, So anyways, I'm tripping over my words, but we're asking for less for that particular position because the person that we recruited had less experience. So that's where we're at on that. And we do have enough money for another modest increase in that position next year. We do realize with the inflation and everything, we're going to have to, hopefully WSU will keep pace and do some increases because it's pretty hard to keep people in some of those positions that aren't super high paying positions. So we want WSU to try to be proactive in that. We had a small increase in the vehicle ER and R rental rates, so that's listed on our budget change form. And overall, it comes out to a net reduction of $2,071 in the overall budget. Right? Yep, right up there. So I don't know, do you guys have any questions on the budget specifically?
Looks good to me.
Try to be conservative. I actually was in Benton County yesterday because Gwen Hoheisel's on leave, or on professional development leave right now, so I went and presented the budget for her. And like I told the Benton County Commissioners, Gwen and I go in we look at the program across the area, not from one county to another, and try to make sure we offer services for the whole area. So we're strategic in that, and I presented that budget yesterday. And that budget, of course, includes similar faculty contributions, and then there's a program support specialist position there that's funded in Benton County for the Master Gardener program. So again, Gwen and I just looking forward. One of the things we're hoping to get refilled soon is the livestock position. So our livestock agent got recruited to a statewide position at WSU and was taken out of the Benton County office a couple years ago. And we're looking to get that position refilled in the near future. The WSU has been refilling faculty lines the last year or so, which is a good thing because we went through a period when tuition dollars are down, it affects all of WSU, including extension. And when COVID, the fallout from COVID reduced numbers in enrollment, but WSU has started refilling faculty positions. This livestock agent isn't on the short list, but we hope to get it on the next year. So we're going to now keep working on that. That's a priority for us in this county. And I would, as you guys look through that sheet as to what we do, if you're seeing deficiencies there or things, we try to change with the community needs. That's really what we want to do. And if you guys think we're missing the target on that, we do appreciate feedback. So we're always open to that. I make the joke that I found the report of the first year of extension in Franklin County from 1917 or 1918. And the primary role was to eliminate jackrabbits and sagebrush. And we're not doing that anymore. If we were still doing that, we'd really have our head, quote unquote, in the sand. But we do want to keep changing with the community needs. So that's, we do need feedback from you guys on that. So please let us know if you have feedback on that as well.
Questions?
I would just like to make a comment that I really appreciated the tour that you gave Keith and I the other day. And one of the things that stood out to me is that the room was all equipped for a meeting that a bunch of 4-H leaders were going to be coming there. And I remember the amount of traffic that came through a co-op that was adjacent to my office at the treasurer's office in Benton County. And I think when the board likes to hear the big, budget tops, it's not in your budget, but I'm thinking long range. Parking is really not adequate for the services you provide there, and the health department is in that building, and they have expressed a desire to probably expand, and it's more conducive. That's the neighborhood where they probably be best served. And so long range, you guys got thrown there when the whole courthouse was put in disarray of the whole remodel. And I think that you'd sometime think about getting you in a place that's more conducive to where visitors can visit at night and do.
Absolutely. I appreciate that and appreciate you and Keith coming down. I do want to thank Keith. I know this isn't the forum for that, but Keith's been great to work with, and I appreciate you guys coming down and talking, and appreciated his service over the years. Been a great colleague. So, but no, I think that's a good point. We want to be, and you and I talked about this, we want to be where it's easy for people to get access to our services. All of us that work in the office, we're passionate about helping people. Everybody, we want to help everybody that comes in the door. So we want to have a place where people can find us easily, where they're comfortable coming to get our services. And that's one thing we worry a little bit about in that community. When you get into the winter hours and it gets dark early, it's a little bit of not the safest feeling neighborhood in town for sure. So we want to be where people can get to us easy and where they feel comfortable coming in. We have people bringing their kids in for 4-H projects and stuff like that, and we want it to be a safe area. And we've worked on that over the years with some different things, making sure it's safe. And we've got some little measures in there that have really worked, like the electric door and stuff like that. It makes our employees feel safer. It makes people that come in feel safer. But we want to be in a good, accessible area. And I don't know, it's kind of interesting. If you look at a log of the people that come in, we get a lot of different people that come in for different things. Sometimes they're not coming to the right place, but we want them to be comfortable. And we definitely want to be accessible. One of the things that, we of course serve the agricultural community a lot, but we're also serving, people with backyard trees and stuff like that. Our Latino outreach program has really increased over the last, how many years has Anna Maria been here? Like 8 years? Yeah. So we're making a lot of strides there. And, as long as it's easy for people to find. And the other thing that's really key for us is some of our people don't have good transportation. So having a place where people could get off a bus stop and get to the office is another important piece too. Not a lot of people that come to our office use those, but some people do. And we want to make sure everybody can get there and get what they need. So. And COVID was challenging. We're glad to be hopefully past that and being back in person. It's great to see people in those rooms with the trainings. One of the things, I guess, this maybe not the forum for this, but sometimes people come in and they're not going to the right place and we're kind of off away from everything else. So if they come in and they're not at the right place, we have to send them across town. And so, sometimes if there's a way to have some of those services in near proximity, I think it would benefit the community as well.
How long do people show up at your office to renew their tabs after the auditor?
Do we have tab people still? Yeah. Josefina knows how to tell everybody where to go. I had to.
Now, you want to rephrase that? She tells
Oh,
everybody where to go?
thanks. Yeah. She doesn't do that very much. She's very polite. But I went to put my knife and my hat back in the pickup because I started to walk in with them. And I came back and she was helping somebody find. What were you helping her find? Yeah, municipal court. Anyway, so Josefina is a great resource. No matter where you take her, people just know to ask her for information. They walk right by me and walk up to Josefina. It's a good choice.
It sounds like you need to be on the north side of town, but still in the city on a bus route.
Yeah.
But on the
bus
closer
route.
to all where the farms are would be
Yep.
really helpful.
Yep, that'd be good. Yep. We get a lot of people that come in to do pesticide license exam renewals, which is a little service that we offer. So we need to have a room where people can have like testing and stuff like that done, because that's, I don't know how many people come in and do that a year, but it's a lot. Yeah.
Parking's already scarce and farmers drive trucks that take up 2 spaces. So then
Yes.
it's even
yes.
worse.
Yeah, they just park wherever they want anyway, so.
Careful.
I had to put that, I just want to see if he's paying attention.
Yeah.
So it's not part of the budget, but what do you attribute the low tonnage of potatoes this year to? That
Yeah,
month
the
of June?
temperature. Yeah, the month of, early warm days are so important for crop growth. I think you probably need 5 warm days in the late summer to make up for a nice spring day. It's really quite dramatic. All the crop yields, almost everything is down a little bit.
Oh, the potatoes are down big time because there's talk that they won't even fill that storage.
Yeah, and
ours out there.
we were getting calls from restaurants in July because the early potato harvest was delayed and they used up what was in storages this year. And seed was a little bit short this year, so the fewer acres planted, yields are lower. It's going to be, the fresh market prices will probably be really good. The processing stuff's going to run short, which will impact people. It's going to be a little bit rough. And there was a quarantine on potato seed out of Prince Edward Island. Little things like that impact the amount of acres you can plant. And so there were all sorts of circles that were, 3 varieties in one circle, which you don't see very much. We actually struggled to find seed for our 7 acres of potato plots. Usually I go to one place and I had to go to about 5 places to get potato seed. Everybody was nice and everybody would kind of give me seed and say, don't tell anybody where you got it, because everybody had these little arrangements where when you finish, we want whatever you have left, and people were, that's one of the nice things about the ag community here is everybody kind of looks out for each other, and you can see it when things get tight, like when they were talking about potato seed, they're like, well, as soon as I'm done with this, it's going to so-and-so, because,
Yep.
you know, they're competitors, but, you know, they're all kind of in it together too. So that's kind of a neat thing about the ag community here.
Power in numbers.
Yep, yep.
Well, thank you. Are there any other questions? Really appreciate you coming in. It's good to see you.
Yep, good to see you guys too. Thanks for your time. It does look like it is stink bugs. I'll peel it when I get to the pickup.
Yeah. So it does look like stink bugs.
Yeah,
huh?
I sent it to another entomologist who works in apples, and that's what he
Well, that was-
he thought as well.
As a kid, I don't remember stink bugs. So is this something that came from another area of this country and is?
Oh, well, there's a brown marmorated stink bug that's moved around the country, but there's other stink bugs that are out there. And what they do when things are good in the CRP or whatever else, they live out there.
They're out
When things
there.
dry down, they move in.
Gotcha.
And that's, you know, the trees on the edge of the field, you know, that's probably what happened. They're moving out of the, you know, whatever's drying up, and yeah.
Also noticed a heck of a infestation of gnats this year. It was,
Yeah, there's a lot of aphids around. It also, when you were a kid, they were using lead arsenic in the orchards, so nothing crawled around.
we never had any orchard, so don't accuse me of having that in my system.
Nothing crawled around in the orchard very long. So if you look at what they're using now, the residual's a lot shorter. You know, so that's part of it too. But yeah, the aphids were really bad. There's the woolly ash aphid in all the trees out here. and
Yep.
Everywhere else in town, but they'll be gone when it gets cold here next week.
Timmy, you know there is a state law about transporting fruit, so you just be
Yeah.
careful.
It
throw that
stayed
out
in
there.
Franklin County.
Back in Mr. Didier's truck. when
It
I
was,
leave.
it was picked in Franklin County and it's staying in
Throw it out the
Franklin.
window before you go across the Cable Bridge
Yeah,
for some of
absolutely.
this.
Yep.
Why don't you go give it to Governor Inslee and see what he says about that?
Thanks for your guys' time.
Thank
today.
you.
Thank you.
All right, well, I think that concludes our budget. Is there anything else we need to catch up on, Keith?
I'm looking to Tim, but I don't think so. I think we covered all of them. There weren't any postponements. And now the fun starts with slicing and dicing.
So thank you, Tim, and thank you, Keith, for
Thank
sticking
you.
around and helping us get through this budget.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. All right, so if there's no other business, we will adjourn the workshop, the budget